call this meeting to order. This is the regular meeting of the Northfield Public School Board. Today is Monday, August 28th, 2017, and the time is 7 p.m. Dr. Hillman, there were a couple of items in the table file.
Yes, in this evening's table file, we had some items for consent grouping, some personnel items, some appointments, some increases, decreases, change in assignment, leave of absence request, and some information about the TRA part-time teacher program.
Okay, excellent. Thank you very much. If there's no objection, we'll add these items to the agenda as we move forward. We now have an opportunity for public comment. This is a chance for anyone residing in the Northfield Public School District to address the board. Is there anyone here who wishes to address the board? Okay. Seeing no one come forward, we'll move on to approval of the minutes. Board members, you have in your packet minutes of the regular school board meeting held on Monday, August 14th, 2017. Is there a motion to approve these minutes? Moved by Amy. Is there a second? Second by Jeff. Any comments or discussion? Okay. All those in favor of approving the minutes of the regular school board meeting held on Monday, August 14th, 2017, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. We will move on now to announcements and recognition. Dr. Hillman.
Yes, I have three announcements this evening. First, we have some great news to share with you this evening about the Summer Plus program. And this year, the program administered the Dynamic Indicators of Basic Early Literacy Skills, commonly known as DIBELS. That's an assessment that we use pretty frequently throughout the school district. And Summer Plus, what they did is they reviewed the students' spring DIBELS scores from before they left for the summer. They did some assessment of both the midpoint and the ending of the program in August. And I'm very pleased to report that 80% of the students in the Summer Plus program saw an increase in their oral reading fluency abilities. And of course, oral reading fluency is a real benchmark that we look at toward student reading comprehension skills. So 80% of students involved in the Summer Plus program demonstrated an increase in their oral reading fluency abilities. And you know, we often talk about the summer slide and how we can try to affect that. And in this case, students who participate in Summer Plus did not have the summer slide. Not only did they not have a slide, but they actually increased their skills over the summer. And so I just really want to thank Daryl Keller, the entire Summer Plus staff for their work, and of course District Director of Assessment Services Hope Langston for making sure that we are collecting data along the way. And they even have it broken out by what intervention each student group had and the effectiveness of that. So some really good data in terms of looking at how Summer Plus students fared in terms of improving their reading skills. It's actually very exciting, and we're really pleased to share that data with you. We were thrilled to welcome back teachers for the official start of the 2017-18 school year today. Today was a teacher preparation day, and we look forward to having educational assistants and other staff join us tomorrow for training. And then, of course, we're excited to welcome elementary students back for Ready, Set, Go Day on Wednesday. There's a middle school open house on Wednesday night, and then of course the big day next Tuesday when we have students come back for the 2017-18 school year. And with that, I just want to remind board members that you're invited to attend the district-wide employee back to school meeting tomorrow morning. It's in the middle school cafeteria. A light breakfast will be served at 7:30 a.m. And at 8 o'clock, we'll all move into the auditorium to listen to my referendum presentation and some other pieces for the 2017-18 school year. And then after me, Mr. James Coulter, who is a social worker with Rice County, will deliver the keynote address titled "The Ghost of Our Children's Future." And we will be done with the morning by 10 a.m. and I'm predicting we'll be done quite a bit before that. So board members are certainly invited to come. And those are your announcements and recognitions for this evening.
Excellent. Thank you. I just had one comment. You talked about the teachers and staff coming back, and of course we know that our high school athletes are already working hard, but just wanted to make a special note of our high school band who are, instead of hanging out in this beautiful night with their friends, they are working on their music and they're marching for the Jesse James Parade. And then following that, they will be working pep band for the first football game, which is actually not that far away. So we appreciate the students' dedication to doing that, and we know that their band music is always very much enjoyed by our community. Okay. So with that, we can move on to items for discussion. Tonight we have both Greenville Park and Sibley Elementary School improvement plans. We are going to begin tonight with Greenville Park, and we have the opportunity now to welcome the new principal, Sam Richardson, not only to the board, but to Northfield and to Greenville Park.
Thank you. Good evening, members of the board, and I just want to say it's an honor to be here and representing Greenville Park in my hometown of Northfield, Minnesota. It's been an awesome start to the school year. Today we had staff back for the first day, and staff have been very welcoming, and it's been exciting to get the year started with those staff members. So thank you to all staff members and parents and district employees who've welcomed me back. So it's been great. This evening we're going to be presenting the School Improvement Plan report for Greenville Park, and it would be important for me to honor those who have played an important role in creating this plan, and that includes Mary Grace Hansen, who was interim principal in the springtime, Hope Langston, who helped with a number of different data reports and consulting, and then site council leadership from the school, including building level leaders, Melissa Larson and Diane Torbenson and Heather Ryden. So this has been a wonderful way for me as an incoming principal to learn about the building, past goals and successes and opportunities, and then kind of looking towards the future this year. So with that, I will jump in and start the presentation. Obviously, part of our work has been to figure out where our individual teams and our school work fits into the larger strategic plan for the district, and ultimately all of the actions that we are presenting tonight and talking about have to impact the students and their growth and achievement. In reviewing the goals from last year, what we learned is that in the area of reading, the goal had focused on helping students who were in the non-proficient category move out of that category to become proficient readers. And when you look at the goal of reducing students in that area by 10% by the spring of last year, you'll notice that that goal unfortunately was not met. The number of non-proficient readers actually increased by 2.5%. And so as we move forward, that's continuing to be an area of emphasis, and I know Diane Torbenson has shared with me different plans that have been in place and future plans for the next steps for that area. Math, in a similar vein, focus was to reduce the number of students that were non-proficient, and in math on the MCA 3s, looking at a 10% goal to reduce the number that were non-proficient. And that goal was also not met, and the number of non-proficient students increased by 7.7%. So as I'm sure you've heard in other presentations, we certainly want to use the MCAs as one data point, but we also want to look at many others. And so with Hope Langston's help and Mary Grace, I've been looking at other data points to find out where there are grade levels and where as a school our growth is lying. So using NWA MAP data to see different grade levels and different students that are making growth. They may not have made it to proficiency, but that's an important factor that we need to reflect on and include in our conversations as well. Moving to climate. In the area of climate, what I noticed is that the school was working very hard to increase positive social interactions through recognition. And so you'll notice in the climate area, the goals were to have 100% of the classrooms recognizing students as character kids or kids who were demonstrating character traits that the building valued, and that that will continue again this year with those character traits being an area of emphasis. Recognizing playground heroes, and those were students who were found on the playground demonstrating some sort of character trait or school-wide effective characteristic like respect, working hard, belonging, those types of things. And then also looking at the number of Kachus and goal getters with that goal setting award. In the climate area, they were able to reach their goal. 100% of the classrooms were recognizing students each month. The playground heroes were recognized at building-wide meetings 44% of the time. So I'm guessing, Mary Grace, there were certain months that didn't always work into the logistics of the meetings. And then goal getters were recognized as well on a regular basis. So I think as we look at that goal for recognition, that's a great bridge to next year and kind of looking ahead. In working with the staff and talking through what are key reflections or next steps for us, some of the learning, the literacy teamwork, and in terms of conversations they're having and analysis they're doing as we look at a new K-5 reading curriculum is very important. In the math area, this was the first year for the 4th edition of the Everyday Math curriculum, and evidently, as they were finding kind of new learnings through the implementation of the curriculum, they see different areas, and I know district-wide math work is helping to address some of those, and that's going to be important work moving forward too in the area of math. And then with the building climate, reflections were that the recognitions were really positive and met a lot of the needs of our students. A majority even probably can be successful, with recognition and with the building and belonging to a positive community in the classroom and in the school. But looking ahead, the questions and the excitement for the new social emotional curriculum, second step, have people, really looking at how can we be proactive and help some of those students develop the skills they need, to be as successful as other students have been. Working with the team in the area of literacy, one of the things that you will notice is that the team really wanted to find some goals that looked at growth, and the schools talked a lot about growth mindset and helping students, wherever they're starting, move to that next level of achievement. We want all students ultimately to be proficient on the MCAs. This data point for kindergarten helps us see how students are growing and the impact of instruction from fall to spring. So in kindergarten, the FAST composite of literacy assessment will be used to measure students that are in the low risk category, which means high chance of probability of being proficient as they head on to first grade. From fall to spring, they're looking for an increase of 15%, and Hope Langston helped us determine that target by looking at trend data and past data for kindergarten assessments. In grades 1 through 5, Greenvale, and I know the other elementary schools have a history of using the NWEA MAP assessment in fall and at times winter and then in the spring. This helps us measure that growth from a student who enters our school in the fall and then is graduating from a grade level in the spring. Again, Hope Langston helped with identifying trend data. We have a little bit more trend data for the MAP test than some of our other assessments. So these targeted percentages are based on several years and looking at how grade levels have performed and their SMART goals, so they're achievable and realistic, and they're definitely extending the grade levels. So they're lofty, but definitely achievable, and it'll be a great way for us to measure how we're helping students grow as they move through the year this year. In the area of math, this year, the team really wanted to look at shorter assessment intervals. And so for the math goal for our school, this is one also, I should go back, for both reading and math, it was really important to us that we include all grade levels. There are times where we've used the MCA assessment as the school goal, and at times it feels like that's a goal for 3rd, 4th, and 5th grade students and their teachers. So we really tried to encompass all grade levels in this goal setting. 80% of students will score 80% or higher on selected quarterly everyday math unit tests. So as teachers are working for the second time with this Everyday Math 4 curriculum, they will have a chance to get feedback as students are taking these unit tests, not waiting till the end of the year to assess the impact of instruction, but to really take a look as it's happening. And so quarterly was determined to be a great start. We want teachers to be looking regularly at how students are performing, and they do, but this is a more formal look, and setting a lofty goal of 80% is going to push us as well. In the area of climate, this is what I alluded to earlier, that the excitement for the second step curriculum is really looking at increasing positive behavior by teaching in a real explicit way and a real comprehensive way across all classrooms about those social and emotional skills that we sometimes take for granted as adults that we really need to help students learn. And this will be measured by looking at the percentage of major and minor behaviors that were reported. And we use the Swiss database, which is an easy way for us to enter and then generate reports and see, by a number of different categories where behaviors are happening and what types of behaviors. And this also was, we were able to set target goals by using multiple years data. This is just some of the strategies and assessments, and as I'm talking with teams, there's many other strategies and different plans for implementation that are in place. And so when I was first looking at the documents, this looks like very doable, but a little bit slim for specificity. But when I talked with the team leads and the instructional coaches, they really have a comprehensive plan for different things that they already have ready to go in place and things that we can help develop further. In the area of literacy, this year Greenville Park will have a literacy team. That team will be really focused on helping identify those areas that teachers need maybe more professional development, areas that need more alignment in the curriculum. It may help introduce new strategies to teacher teams and also take a look at data and make some decisions during the course of the year. Success Maker was a program that I know Mary Grace had shared with me that was real positive in terms of results for 5th grade readers. This year, the next bullet point underneath there is something that we're exploring at all elementary schools, and that's looking at some individualized technology that would help with learning to read, but it would be in a real differentiated way. This wouldn't be something that would be in addition to Success Maker, but likely it would be something that would be the next step for those teams. So that's something that would be a learning goal for this year and will be exciting. In the area of math, similarly, a math team, and this is a leadership team that brings important stakeholders, grade level representatives to help, again, with the alignment of the curriculum, establish, are there professional development needs for the building? Are there strategies that teachers are implementing that are successful that we want to replicate in other areas of the building? So this team really has real specific goals, and I think will be a positive influence on our school. We also at Greenville Park have a new Title I math intervention position, and so this intervention position will really help with supporting those students that we find in the core area of instruction are needing more, and they just need something that's real specific and targeted, and it needs to be delivered regularly and in a predictable way. And so this position is new to us, and in working with Mary Grace and the Title I framework, this will be something that we'll definitely want to report on as the year progresses. And then also, I know after you have brought in any curriculum, there always are options for and need for additional resources. And so I know there's new smartboard lessons, electronic lessons, and online resources that go along with the curriculum and are standards-based, so they'll help to address any holes, gaps, or additional needs that students have shown. In the area of climate, the second step curriculum and implementing that is going to be, the number one goal. And so we start with that tomorrow afternoon as teachers receive training on that program. And teachers are really excited. They're excited because they've heard positive things from colleagues, from other schools, from those who have piloted it. And then I think they really see that as a great lever to help students who need those skills. Also, still, continuing with building-wide meetings, changing the format slightly, but wanting to make sure that we're still teaching, connecting the whole school community, and recognizing students who are setting goals, being positive, and making good behavior choices at school. So that's just a brief overview of the journey at Greenville Park and the different conversations that we've had as a team, both before my arrival and after I've arrived. So wanted to leave time for questions and any discussion. And again, thank Mary Grace Hansen for all of her support connecting the school to me and as we came in the beginning of July.
Excellent. Thank you, Sam. Questions or comments board members have? Rob.
Hi. First of all, thanks, Mary Grace, for filling in and making the transition, and thanks, Sam, for coming back, and welcome back, and I'm excited to have you here. Now the hard question, I guess, is looking at the report from last year, which you're not responsible for because you just arrived, but I'm interested in the fact that the measurements for math and reading have slightly decreased. I mean, the proficiency have slightly decreased, but the behavior or the climate goals are 100%. So that looks like the climate has increased, but the math and reading has gone down. And we're always told that there's like a positive correlation between climate and behavior and academic achievement, that if we create, positive behaviors, we'll also create positive academic achievement. So I'm wondering if there's a way in the future to measure that, or, to find out if what we're doing with behavior, like with all the new social emotional curriculum, if that's actually having academic consequences, improvements.
Sure. No, I am interested in that as well, and I think that's a really important part of the implementation of that curriculum. But there are a number of factors, and that's really been part of my first 2 months is figuring out who are these students, and that's why it's really important to look at many different factors. And as you discover, there are certain students that the behaviors sometimes do impact their academics, and for other students there are other factors and experience in the classroom, different types of instruction. So I think that the question you're asking is very good, and I think that's part of our work this year with that new curriculum, is to see what is the real impact, and I think also the goal setting as we do that. I'm really excited to be a part of that going forward. To figure out, are the goals that we're setting really helping to address that? So.
Can I just add one thing?
Dr. Hillman, absolutely.
So I think you raise a very good question, and as you know, the social emotional approach that we've taken in the past was more building wide. It was more of a everybody gets kind of the same thing, but at a higher level, at a building level. And what I think we determined, that even though we made some climate goals, that it was not enough. It was more of a promotional kind of thing, I think it's fair to say. Recognition, all very good things. But what I think Sam is describing is that second step is a very intentional instructional model. So it's not just that we're going to talk about the character word of the month. There's specific intentional instruction that every student in the building is going to receive in their homeroom, in their classroom. So we're taking it from that we have some really cool things happening across the building, but we're taking it down one step further to make sure that not only do kids have that, but there's also some assessment strategies and some other things that we can do to try to measure that as well. And I know that that is one of our goals, is to be able to tie some of those things together. So I just think that the SEL second step curriculum is going to make it into an actual core curricular approach, which we think will make a difference. And frankly, research tells us that that will make more of a difference than the approaches that we have used with good intention in the past.
So would you say that things like Caught You Being Good or whatever, that they're kind of rewarding kids who are self-motivated to do good things, but this is going to be a building-wide, it's going to be a curricular approach that actually teaches these behaviors instead of just rewarding them when they randomly occur or something.
Right, exactly. And so a great example, would be kindergarten students. We often ask them to be respectful. But this will help break down what does that actually mean, and how do you physically do some of those things that adults would notice. Or listening, where do your eyes position, how do you actually listen, and what would your body look like when you are listening. So I think those types of skills, is really breaking it down to the ground level. And so yeah, that's probably a great example.
Okay, thank you.
Good question, thanks, Rob. Amy?
I just want to understand a few things, and welcome, by the way.
Thank you.
Happy to have you a part of the team. I was looking at the first two goals, which were not met, and my question was, were you comparing spring test scores to fall test scores? Were they the same cohorts, or was it from year to year where the cohorts had changed somewhat? Do you know?
So I'm going to, if I'm wrong, I'll have Mary Grace Hansen correct me, but my understanding with that goal is that they were looking at different cohorts, but the previous year's total MCA scores, so it would be those students that 2 years ago were in 3rd, 4th, and 5th grade, and how many of those students were in the non-proficient area. And then last spring, so that would be the spring of 17, those students that were in 3rd, 4th, and 5th grade, they were looking at how many of those students were in that category of non-proficient. So, and that, like you're kind of alluding to, that can be a different comparison.
Apples to oranges in
because
some ways.
it is
yeah.
some of those students are the same in that, but they're also taking the next level of test for grade levels.
So if I read your new goals for next year, right, you're sort of correcting that and going to be comparing more cohorts to themselves and individuals to themselves?
Correct. So they're looking at, in the area of reading, that will be really looking at how the students in the school right now start out in the fall, and then where the teachers can move them in the spring. And then also in the math area, that will be looking more at their performance on the material that it's taught, and in more real time, and those shorter intervals.
And another thing I'm curious about on your SMART goals for grades 1 to 5, and your 3rd grade SMART goal has a 50% growth target, and why is that one lower than the rest? Do they start higher so you expect fewer, or
No,
why?
it's an interesting trend, and just as we looked over the course of time for the past 3 and 4 years that the test has been given, when we look at the scores and the trend, that's where that data point was leading us. Those data points were leading us for future. So that's an interesting thing that I will be working to uncover what are the next steps for each of those grade levels.
So did you compare, for this year's 3rd graders, did you look at their 2nd grade scores, or did you look at last year's 3rd graders?
So this is a grade level comparison, so it's 3rd graders in each of the past few years. So it's not the same exact kids every year, but this is looking a little bit more at the grade level itself.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Good question, thank you. Ellen?
Hi, so thanks again for, one, I wanted to say, I really appreciate the format again of the, am I not?
Yep.
Okay.
Now you're on.
I really appreciate the format of the report, and it was really coherent, and particularly knowing all the transitions that the building went through, it was really nice to see. I'm also really excited about having the second step curriculum as part of a goal. I think that's really ambitious, not, knowing that your teachers are just getting introduced to it, but I'm really appreciative of that. I also had a question going off of thinking about next year's goals on the literacy piece. So I was trying to understand, and I know Hope's talked about these growth goals before, and I like them because they're for all students, but what I was trying to connect was, like, if you look at fourth grade, there's 31% who wouldn't be part of the meet or exceeds. So I'm assuming some of those would be sort of a ceiling effect, like some of the high flyers, it may be more difficult, so looking at the trend data saying, well, we'll have that. But what I'm trying to connect with, too, is trying to influence, like, with the growth goals, how would we look at the opportunity gaps? Because that's what you had, sort of the non-proficient goals from the previous year, we're really looking at that gap, and now we're looking at sort of all students in a growth goal, which includes addressing opportunity gap and all, everyone. So I'm not being very coherent, but I guess what I'm trying to connect with is, how would you anticipate, if you met these goals, that it would influence the opportunity gap shrinking?
Sure. So I think one of the things is when you look at a larger selection of map data over time, we notice a few different things. And one is that for some students, the material, just there is an effect. We find, sometimes that for those students, they do test, high in the fall, and if they stay very similar, it can be a little bit of a statistical game where they did do a great job. They made great gains, but they didn't quite make that, and so the computer prints out a report that says they didn't quite make their growth goal. So we take that as one consideration. I think this is one way that we can really look at the students that we have in the fall and the students that we have in the spring and see if they're growing. At the same time we're doing that, we're triangulating with progress monitoring data on a weekly basis. We're taking a look at those MCA scores for those 3rd through 5th graders as well. And then there's other assessments, benchmark assessments and different things teachers provide, always trying to gauge, are they at grade level? And so that's how we can also, figure out if students are growing, but they're not at that proficiency level, then we have one course of action. If students are growing and are above, the proficiency level, we have to figure out how to challenge them. If students are at proficiency level and they're not growing, that's a whole nother conversation. How can we stretch them and find that? So, yes, I think when I see reports from Mary Grace Hansen and from Hope Langston and the team, they're really looking at all of those things and in great depth, and they're looking at different breakdowns by demographics and socioeconomic status, and they really know those things. And then what we're doing with our students shouldn't look the same then if we have students in all those different areas of growth and proficiency. So yeah, that's a great question.
I was just going to, and Mary, I'm going to ask you to just verify, but I think one of the other pieces is when they set the MAP goal, Ellen, it's dependent upon where you start. So when you ask the opportunity gap question, kids who have a larger way to grow toward proficiency, sometimes you'll see those students' goals be significantly more than, say, a student who already has exceeded, you're at that. So I think that the goal setting is inherent in that piece, and trying to, if I have a long way to go before proficiency, my goal may be larger than some of my classmates. So it is really an individualized piece based upon where you're starting. And so I've seen that map data from time to time where you have a kid who has a long way to go to proficient. The goal may not even get them to proficiency, but they need a couple of steps to get there. So they may reach their goal but not be proficient, but they're far closer to proficiency than they were when they started. You have a student who, say, is performing in the 97th or 98th percentile student. Their goal may be much smaller than a student who is below proficiency, but it becomes that much more difficult to get. Does that make any sense in terms of that?
So can I see if
Absolutely.
So what I guess I'm understanding then is this in some ways is even, before it was looking at just the opportunity gap, and now we're looking at all students. So even if these goals weren't met, it could be that there's significant inroads on the opportunity gap.
Absolutely.
It's just that the way the MAP growth goals are set, it's pretty aspirational on some of them. I mean, it's really challenging.
Yeah, I think that they try to be reasonable, but they plot a course and they look at what do we think with quality core instruction and other kinds of interventions, how far can students get in a particular year. And the issue is, in a lot of MAP data, if you look, some of the kids, in fact, a lot of kids who don't exceed or meet or exceed their goal, they're the kids who are already proficient. So that's a little bit of a different way to look at it too. But I would agree that these goals, I think it's going to address more of the opportunity gap than it might look at on the surface.
Thank you.
I think so.
Excellent. Great questions. Board members, any other questions? Okay, well, again, Sam, thank you very much. We realize it was a presentation that you had to give with not a lot of background to last year, obviously, and just your work you've been able to do over the summer. So it was very well done. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, I'm excited to be there with the staff and then be able to report out next year at this time. So,
Excellent. We look forward to having you back.
thank you.
Okay, we'll move on then to Scott Sanis and the Sibley Elementary School Site Improvement Plan.
All right, I think we're ready to go. All right, well, good evening, members of the board, Dr. Hillman. Thank you for allowing us to be here tonight. I just want to also thank some people who helped out with this report. First off, I want to thank Sam. Sam shared a lot of terminology that you're going to see in this report as well. And I can tell you that the administrative team, and I know I speak for Nancy specifically, Nancy and I are more than happy to have Sam join our elementary team. He's been just a wonderful addition and has been doing a fantastic job with us here in Northfield. I also want to thank Peg Witt, our behavior coach, who had played a significant role last year in her first year. Becky Gainey, who is our literacy coach, and then Tanya Will, who is our math coach. They have all contributed over the last year to not only this report, but everything that happened leading up to this report this summer. As Sam mentioned, Hope has done some data crunching for us, and that has been beneficial. And I've been here a long time, and we haven't always been on the same page in this district with professional development and that kind of thing. And when I look at what Mary has put together for us this year, Sam mentioned the trainings that we're doing during this workshop week and whatnot, and we are all on the same page from the district perspective. So it really is nice to work as a team and know that what we're doing as a district, we're moving in the same direction at the same time. I'm going to share a little bit about our continuous improvement at Sibley, or our goal for continuous improvement. We continue to focus all of our practices on the students and their continuous improvement, both academically and socially. And Sam had mentioned, both academic goals at Greenvale and the social, emotional goals at Greenvale, and we're in the same boat moving forward. We strive to work with families and the communities to support all aspects of each and every student that we have. And we have a very diverse group of learners in all of our elementary schools, and that presents a challenge, but I believe that we have the horsepower behind us to meet the challenges. We've worked hard at developing a growth mindset with both students and staff, and quite a bit of our professional development at Sibley has been around the growth mindset. And before we started talking to students about the growth mindset, we worked with our teachers on the growth mindset. And literacy, math, and social emotional professional development occurs each month at Sibley. We have 2 staff meetings a month. One of those is more of a business meeting. The other is totally focused on professional development, and that is typically led by our coaches. In reviewing our school improvement goals from last year, all 6 grade levels have partially met or completely met mid-year and end-of-year SMART goals. And the goals that you see in the report are goals from our PLC groups. We're awaiting MAP testing to determine if we've met the overarching building goals. And at Sibley, we determined that we would measure fall to fall. So we tested last fall. We will go back this September when we go through our MAP testing in both literacy and mathematics. We will compare our scores from last fall to this fall. Teachers have received training and have made progress with our climate goal, and I'll share a little bit more about that. The key reflections are grade level SMART goals were set as stretch goals to really raise the bar and meet the unique needs of every student. And those SMART goals, as I mentioned, are worked on during our PLC time. Each grade level takes a look at the data, they get to know their students, and they set those goals. And that's something that's very important moving forward. All of our grade levels still subscribe to the flexible grouping, and we have a block schedule that I talked to the board about several years ago, and the flexible grouping happens at each grade in 1 through 5. Kindergarten, they don't do any flexible grouping at this point, but they still definitely have their SMART goals and work together as a team. Progress was made, and teachers knew their students at a deeper level just because of that PLC, because of the PLC goals and the professional development provided by the University of Minnesota. Last January, we, as a building, hired the University of Minnesota to come in and provide us with press training. And basically, press is a classroom-wide intervention system for literacy. And that is something that we did the training in late January at about the semester break. And we had the teachers get to know the press philosophy and whatnot. And then we set a goal for each grade level or each classroom to actually have a press intervention, classroom intervention completed by a certain date. And then we had those groups, those teachers report back on how things went with that press intervention. And what's interesting about the press intervention is that there's basically a checklist where you look at data and basically it narrows it down to a point where this is the intervention that you should use for your specific class. And it is really a cool thing to see happen. I've talked with Mary about it, and Mary is bringing that press training to both Greenvale and Bridgewater this school year. And we're going to be fortunate enough where our new teachers, I think, are going to be able to jump on and get some press training with those groups. As Sam mentioned, with our EM4 implementation last year, we have discovered the need that we do need to supplement our curriculum. And that's something that was very apparent at our 5th grade level, and something that our teachers have taken to heart and something that they're working on moving forward for this year. The social emotional training, coupled with the work of our behavior specialist, is a more solid foundation for each and every student. And I can't tell you how important the impact was of having Peg Witt work with our students and work with our teachers, and not only share some of her knowledge, but also be very instrumental in bringing that second step curriculum to this district. As we move to this year, our PLC SMART goals are written in September, so those are our goals that will be written by each individual PLC team the first 3 or 4 weeks of school. Our goal is to usually have that completed by the last PLC meeting in September. Our overarching goals, which we always have overarching building goals, is that all students will demonstrate measurable gains in reading fluency and comprehension, with 1 year's growth being the minimum. And we measure that with our MAP assessment. But we also measure it in many ways, as you see with our PLC goals for each grade level. And then all students will generate measurable gains in math, with 1 year's growth being the minimum in that area as well. As we move to our school improvement climate goals, 90% of students will receive no more than 1 fix-it plan for the upcoming school year, while following the Sibley behavior guidelines of work, respect, belong. And one thing to point out, and you had this conversation a bit with the last presentation in regards to behaviors, I would say that 50% of our behaviors come from kindergarten. And that's been the trend the last 3 years. And we use Swiss data to document behaviors, and Peg Witt has that information, and Swiss is really a cool system where it not only measures the behaviors at each grade level, but also measures the behaviors when they occur, like what day of the week, what time of the day, those kinds of things. And that's been important data for us moving forward. and something that we continue to do this year. And then last year, Peg brought the praise to reprimand ratio to Sibley, and we want to improve student behaviors with the implementation of best practices. Staff will engage in the 4-to-1 praise to reprimand ratio as measured by classroom observation. If you look in the report, when we first measured last year, about 20% of our teachers were using the praise to reprimand ratio of 4-to-1. And we have specific data on every teacher, and that data is shared with each teacher, and then a goal is actually worked on. By the end of the year, we were at, I think, 40 or 41%. So it's something that is really a work in progress and something our teachers have really focused on as they have delivered their instruction and worked with their students. There's a lot of information in the report. I did really kind of breeze through this presentation, so now I'm at the point where if you have any questions, I'd be happy to entertain them.
Okay, excellent, thank you. Board members, questions, comments? Ellen?
So thanks a lot, Scott. I have one question directly for you and then one teaser that maybe we can talk about, not necessarily tonight, but I was really interested. I was glad that you talked about the press training because I tried to read up a little bit from what I could find, and I'm really excited about what you must have had the teachers, what that professional development was like. And so thinking about the goals that we're going to have be later on the agenda addressed that are the superintendent's goals for literacy, I thought that professional development, I'd be really interested in the future hearing how something like that might tie into the future plans for the literacy curriculum, but I think that's not something to be answered today.
Well, we can because it's scheduled. We have the press training scheduled for the rest of the elementary teachers in January.
Oh, wow.
November. So everyone else is going to, was such a positive thing at Sibley last year that the rest of the elementary staff are getting it in November. And then as Scott mentioned, his new staff who didn't get to receive that training last year will receive it this coming November as well. And I think the key thing is that as we move forward, one of our charges is that we're very good about doing that initial professional development. One of the things that we've struggled with as a district is how to sustain it to make sure all new people get it regularly. So we can tell you we're going to have it.
Well, thank you for the leadership on that. That's really exciting.
Becky Gainey actually brought that, to my attention, and she had mentioned it, and then I was at a principals meeting down, a Southeast Minnesota principals meeting down in Rochester, and the principal, Nancy Stuckey from Triton, presented on the press training. And it's funny because Becky and I had just had the conversation, and then I was able to gather more information about it, brought it back to her, we talked about it, and we were able to make it happen for our January professional development. The one thing I failed to mention earlier is that Becky and I met this morning, and the interventions are 10 days in length, 10 student contact days in length. So we are looking at, teachers can absolutely do this whenever they want. However, we are looking at having 3 10-day sessions for the school year for every classroom at Sibley as a minimum. And that's something that we will be sharing with staff tomorrow at our welcome back meeting.
Thanks.
Sure.
Excellent. Other questions or comments? Rob?
Okay, I've got a couple of questions that kind of spin off from each other. I guess I'll start with the general question. Since you've been here a while, it's interesting having the newest principal and the longest serving principal here.
Thanks for saying longest serving.
So you have a good experience with the role of the principal in setting and meeting these goals. So I'm interested because a lot of this work has to be done by the classroom teacher. And you've mentioned the work that Mary Grace has done in bringing initiatives and training people. So I'm just interested in what the role of the administration is in setting and meeting these goals.
Sure. Well, a big part of what we do is we listen. And, we rotate and we go to all of our PLC meetings. I try to stop in half the grade, have like maybe K2 on one Wednesday and then 3, 4, 5 the next. I found that when we first started with the whole PLC concept, we were trying to get to every meeting every week. And it felt like we were just scratching the surface. And there are times that I might spend the entire hour with a grade level, only because we're digging deep and talking about certain things that we need that hour. And then I might go back and meet with them during their prep time as well. But I think the principal role is more of a shepherd at times, to just make sure that our folks are on point and working on things. What I've noticed with our teachers is that they've become much better users of data over the last 10 years, and they know how to obtain it, and they know how to data mine, and they know how to get what they need to get. That said, there are times where our coaches are supporting them, our literacy coaches and our math coaches, and there are times where Hope is there, and she's working with those PLCs. And there are other times when our superintendent is there, and Dr. Hillman, he embedded himself in our 5th grade PLC last year, and worked with them. And I know you were trying to be a silent worker, but at the same time, they did pull him in and garnered some of his leadership and some of his knowledge and whatnot. So I think our job is, what I try to do is make the rounds, support those teachers, try to provide them with the resources that they need, and at times it might be the expertise of our literacy coach or our math coach, and it could be somebody else. But it's just being there and being present, and I don't think I need to really hold them accountable or holding themselves accountable, because it's a very critical job what they're doing.
Thanks. And then sort of the follow-up question, I noticed on one of the specific goals for math, include a minimum of 60-minute block of instructional time for math daily, K through 5. So I'm wondering, in creating that block of time, is that something that an administrator will say, you create this block of time, or that the teacher figures out how to do that, or how is that actually implemented?
That's a great question. What we have done the last several years is we've gone to a building-wide schedule. And what we've tried to do is make sure that we have support people, in our building. We have reading core people and we have math core people. And when everybody has their math block at the same time, or their literacy block at the same time, it creates some pretty unique challenges for others to either get into that classroom or for students to actually be pulled out for certain things. So we have a building-wide schedule, and every grade level is teaching, like let's say 3rd grade. They're all teaching their literacy block at the same time. They're all teaching their math block at the same time. And what that allows for flexibility. If they want to self-contain their students and teach their own class, they can do that. If they want to, share students across classrooms, they can do that as well. But the time for every grade level is scheduled, and we have a master schedule for our building. And, we have a certain number of minutes that are allocated, to literacy, to math, and to every other academic area.
Okay. Can I ask just one more,
Sure.
slightly more, I guess, specific question? So for a 60-minute block, it seems like maybe for 5th grade, I'm just thinking about attention spans, like it might work differently for kindergarten than it does for 5th grade. So is there a kind of differentiation for attention spans and how you structure that 60 minutes?
Absolutely. I think one thing that you'll see in every classroom is you'll see a teacher teaching a whole group lesson. But then, that teacher knows his or her students very well. So after the whole group lesson, there might be some independent time where students are working on, what they just learned. But then there's also the teacher who is pulling up a small group of students to work on, specific skills based on assessment data that he or she has collected. So the 60 minutes is varied. And what you'll see at the 5th grade level is a model like that. What you'll see at the kindergarten level might be more station time. So students would be working in one station on something specific, and then after a certain amount of time, they'd move to another station. And, the teacher is actually at a specific station working on something else. But, we have educational assistants who work in those classrooms in the primary grades. And then we also have volunteers that come in, from Carleton, St. Olaf, retired folks from our community, parents, and they really support us with those small group initiatives. But every grade level is a little bit different. Nancy Fox and Becky Haar have actually done some flip kinds of lessons where for their high achievers, those students that are really, really moving fast, they have created lessons that students can tap into on their iPad, and they can learn from that. And it's almost like the flipped classroom that you see in the high school setting.
Great, thank you.
Yeah.
Great questions. Thanks, Rob. Amy?
I just would like to hear a little bit more about the 4-to-1 praise to reprimand ratio. And I love the idea. I see it's something that the staff improved upon last year, but you still have more to go. And from what I understand, it's done by observation.
Mm-hmm.
So if the staff knows you're observing them, they might be praising more. I just want to get your thoughts on it.
They may be, and Peg Witt actually did all of that assessment. She's our behavior coach, and she went in and gathered that information. One thing that I think most teachers would tell you is that there are a lot of adults that come in the room and leave, and I can slide into a classroom, and a teacher is engaged in his or her teaching, and they may not even know that I walked in. And that happens at times, but I would agree the praise to reprimand ratio might change when they know they're being evaluated. But at the same time, if they do know about that and they're working on the skill while somebody's there, I think it actually helps them continue that skill once a person leaves. So it's something that is a work in progress, most definitely. It's being more conscious about what's being said and how things are being said. Doesn't completely answer your question, because I don't have a perfect answer for that, but I do understand what you're saying.
So how will you continue to work on it this coming year?
Well, Peg has done some staff development pieces around specific language that can be reframed. If you want, and I can't give you examples off the top of my head, but one of our staff development sessions had to do with if this is your message, this is how you could say it in a positive way versus a more reprimanding way. And it's key phrases and things like that actually work to the advantage of being positive.
Thank you.
Sure.
Excellent questions. Other board members? I had a question around the EM Everyday Math 4.
Mm-hmm.
You teed up a couple of things that you were working on, and then Sam had talked about some work that they had done over the summer. What are maybe some of the challenges you're looking at with that, or where some of the work you're doing on? Because from going back to last year, it looks like this was the first year of Everyday Math 4?
It was.
Okay.
Correct. And, the one thing that I did as a principal is I asked our teachers to teach the EM4 curriculum in the order that it's in. With our last version, we were doing things sometimes out of order because we needed to get certain skill sets in before our students were assessed. And I asked our teachers to teach it in the order that it was in the specific curriculum. And I think we got to the point where not everything was taught prior to our students being assessed. That's one thing. The other thing is that we have learned that there are certain areas in each grade level that we need to supplement more. And that's one of those where you live and learn. And our assessment data, both coming from our MCAs and that we'll generate now with our MAP data in the fall, can tell us a little bit more about the direction we need to go. And it's really kind of interesting to look at that trend data over time, and we always want to compare we always want to look at comparing our current students with themselves, because that's something that is easier for us to do at times, but more difficult at other times. Like when we're looking at MCA data, it's really difficult to watch or see progress from third to fourth, because it's so different at every level.
Okay, great, thank you. And then I just had one other question. Last year, you had the Tier 1 Reading Fidelity Grant. Is that still going forward this year? And how did that work last year?
Do you want to help with that?
Sure. I just had noticed that it was one of the strategies last year, and I didn't see it in one of the new list of strategies for this year, so I wondered where that was in process.
Sure. Thank you. Yes, the state of Minnesota gave out 3 grants in literacy last year, 1 in math, and we got one of the literacy grants. So we worked last year. That's one of the reasons you'll see each elementary school has redeveloped their literacy teams at the school level, and at the district level, literacy team has come into play. Becky Gainey and I attended the meeting on June 16th, and they have announced that they will fund us for several more years. So that's really great. When we look at the Tier 1 grant, it's mostly implementing a fidelity checklist for each of the schools in the area of teams, evaluation, and resources, and assessment. So we looked at each of those 4 areas at the schools, and then as a district, and one of the things we were lacking was district literacy teams at the school level. So that's been changed, and we now have those. And that we will have that as an ongoing grant for at least 2 more years to keep working on that.
Excellent. Thank you to you and Becky for your work on that. Well, if there are any other last-minute questions or comments, Jeff?
Yeah, thanks for your report. Thanks for your service to the district here. I had kind of more of a trend question. In your time here, I wanted to ask you, what trend do you see that we're doing well at, and then what trend do you see that's kind of more of a social dynamic change within the culture, good or bad?
Well, I can speak from the. Well, let me just answer your first question. I think something we're doing really well at is preparing our teachers and providing them with professional development in every aspect of teaching. Literacy, mathematics, social emotional. We are supporting them like we never have before, and I think that's something that is going to be extremely important moving forward. I think the trend that I think is that I can only speak to from the Sibley perspective is that, we're looking at students who are groups of students who are coming to us that aren't like their predecessors in a lot of ways, and I just look at like our poverty index at Sibley has almost doubled in the last 10 years, and I think that's a trend that I've noticed, and I think the other thing that I've noticed is what I referenced earlier. And that is our kindergarten behaviors are higher than normal, and for us at least. One hunch with that is that we have 100 kindergarten students enrolled at Sibley this year, and 20 plus of them are very young. They have birthdays that occur between June 1st and the September 1st deadline. So 20% of our students are just turning 5. And that's something that has been common, very common, since the all-day, everyday kindergarten was funded by the state. And, that could be a contributing factor. My hunch is it's a part of it. And I have some other hunches too. But I'll save those for another time.
Thank you.
You bet.
Excellent question, Jeff. Thank you. Noel?
You made the phrase kindergarten behavior a couple of times.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know what that means. Does it mean good or bad?
Well,
I know what kindergarten behavior means, but I'm not sure what measurement you have.
With negative behaviors, behaviors that are reported to the office, behaviors where there needs to be some kind of intervention, for our students.
So is that what kindergarten behavior is?
That is, and
so it's a negative of it.
It really is, and the majority of our referrals to the office have been kindergarten. And I don't believe it has anything to do with the teachers that are there. I think it has everything to do with what tools students have when they come to us and what experiences they have when they come to us.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying that we have we've had groups of misbehaving children by any
Right,
stretch of the
understand.
imagination. Just compared to their older counterparts, the behaviors are more significant as far as being referred. That said, when we get students who are coming to us from a home or daycare or wherever, we know that they aren't used to the structure of a school, and that's something that they need to get adjusted to. And that is something that comes with time and repetition and good teaching and that kind of thing.
Thank you.
Yeah, you bet.
Excellent. Any other follow-up questions? Sure, Rob, go ahead.
Sorry, it's just great to have like a captive elementary school principal here to ask these questions to. So this is kind of following up on Jeff's question about trends and things that I noticed, like for first grade reading, increase in phonological awareness. And it seems to me that there's, on the one hand, the give children something interesting to read and they'll become readers. And on the other hand, there's the kind of scientific teach them phonological awareness or whatever. And do you see a shift in one way or the other, or are you able to balance those two things?
I think the term balanced literacy comes to mind when you ask that question, and I think that's a big part of it. And I will tell you that our teachers across the grade level are experts in their field, and they dig deep, and they have a lot of tricks up their sleeve that they use with students. And the cool thing about this district is that we're not just working across the hallways, we're working across town and working with others, and I think that's been really important for us moving forward. So it is a level of expertise that I would say is very high. And I would say there are a number of fifth grade teachers that would tell you, I wouldn't want to set foot in a first grade classroom or a kindergarten classroom. And, everybody kind of finds their niche, and it works well, and they become experts. And that's why, when we as principals are looking at moving people from one position to another, just because of the way vacancies fall, we have to look very closely at that and make sure that we're making the right move, for everybody involved.
Great, thanks.
Sure.
Excellent. Any other last-minute questions or comments? Okay. Scott, thank you. Oh, I'm sorry.
Can I just add one thing to Scott's kindergarten behaviors that he is bringing up? For those children that are on scholarships too, so if they're receiving Pathway 1 or Pathway 2 scholarships, so I think this contributes to what Scott is saying. If they are age eligible to go to kindergarten, we can no longer fund them on a scholarship. So it also pushes those who, it pushes some of the kids who are on the young end and have received scholarships to have to go, because if they're age eligible, they're no longer able to qualify for those scholarships. So just something to keep in mind. For preschool, yeah. So we can't, if they want to stay in preschool, they're then needing to either fund it on their own or have a different funding source. They're no longer able to stay on those Pathway 1 or Pathway 2. So if you had a June birthday, had been receiving 2 years of Pathway scholarships, are age eligible for kindergarten, they're now, the state is saying you're going to need to go to kindergarten. We can't fund you for another year. So just to also help, I think, say why you're seeing some young students at kindergarten.
Right, that's great information.
Yes, thank you, Erin. Well, Scott, thank you. Clearly, we respect and value and appreciate the tenure you've had at Sibley, and are always anxious to ask a number of questions for you, so thank you very much.
Sure,
Have
thank
a good
you.
year. Thank you. Okay, so that does take care of our items for discussion and reports this evening. So we'll move on to items for individual action. The first being the superintendent's 17-18 goals. As you recall, Dr. Hillman presented those goals to us at our prior board meeting, with knowledge that we would take action on them tonight. So is there a motion to approve the superintendent's 2017-18 goals as presented? Moved by Amy. Is there a second? Second. Second by Ellen. Questions, comments board members have about the superintendent's goals? Ellen.
So I had a question on goal number 2 on the social and emotional curriculum. Dr. Hillman, can you explain a little bit more about the as evidenced by the aggregation and reporting of the pre and post curriculum assessment baseline data? What that might look like?
Sure. So in terms of making sure that you know that we actually implemented the second step, which our elementary principals tonight did a pretty good job of foreshadowing that we're going to, the second step curriculum has essentially a pre and a post assessment. And in some cases, depending on the age level of the student may complete it themselves. And in some cases, based upon the age level of the student, the teacher may complete it based on their observation of the student. And so, as you know, I like to write SMART goals. And in terms of saying that we would implement that second step curriculum, I felt that I needed to have some kind of tangible deliverable for you to say, yes, it was, not only was it taught, but we also have collected this data at the beginning and the end. So I would anticipate for the mid-year report, we would be able to talk about the pre-assessment. And then, of course, for the end of the year report, we'd be able to talk about both the pre and the post-assessment. And we've actually talked about this being a baseline year. There may be other tools that we choose to use as we move forward, but with a SMART goal, I want to be able to generally produce something for you. In this case, that was what I thought the best way to do that for you was.
Perfect, thanks. Great. Other questions or comments? Rob?
Well, Dr. Hillman actually answered kind of the question, which was about when the assessment data would, how that would feed into our assessment of his progress toward meeting these goals. And I just really appreciate that it's you're not only thinking about what the goals are, but how we're going to see that you've met the goals, because, so that it's not just a kind of, we like Matt, so we're going to say that he met them, but that there's actual
Thank
hard
you, that's
data.
nice, I appreciate that, yes.
Because I think it's good to have real data that we can take the subjectivity out of and really see that the goals have been met based on that data.
And as someone who has written SMART goals my entire career, I've never met a SMART goal that I didn't think I could write, and these are the most difficult SMART goals that I've written, because for the superintendent's role, it's different than it was when I was a district level leader or a principal or a teacher, because if I'm doing my job effectively, I'm relying on other trusted colleagues to be doing some very on the front lines work, and my job is to make sure that they have the resources, the support, and the coaching to make it happen. And so they are actually the most difficult SMART goals I've ever written, because I'm not able to drill down as much as I would have normally. But we ask our schools to do school improvement plans. We ask our principals and our teachers to set goals for themselves. The superintendent should be no different. So we are on the front end of this. This will only be the second year that we've done it, so we'll learn, and I will continue to make recommendations about how we might change this so that you have that objective, because I appreciate, my wit and charm, are usually pretty good, but.
Excellent.
Yeah, and I think that, you want to improve, and you could be happy just saying, people like me, whatever, but that's not that's not something you can improve on, because it's just innate. But
yes,
I think that having these specific goals that are actionable, that you can actually say, we can move the dial on these things, that's really important, so that we can separate our feelings from what we actually see in the data.
Excellent, thanks, Rob. Amy?
So I was going to quip, what are you going to do, Matt? Because you really, really are relying on your team to make all these goals. And I just wanted to say, it was meant to be a joke, but you explained it before I had the chance to do that. And I can see how you really are relying on everybody to meet your goals. And there's you can't control that the same way. But I have all confidence that you're going to be able to provide them with the support and encouragement and resources that your staff needs to make all of this happen and to keep our district moving forward. So thank you.
It's my pleasure. And as you notice, even though they're the superintendent's goals, they're really organizational goals, aren't they?
Yes, exactly. Other questions, comments board members have? Well, I just had a couple comments too, and I really appreciate Rob and Amy's comments. And I do want to thank you, Dr. Hillman, because you developed these goals for our consideration, and clearly, it's going to take some effort and dedication to achieve these goals. And I think one thing, that came through loud and clear in your performance appraisal that that collectively as a board, we most appreciated was what we witnessed in 16-17 was a very comprehensive and transparent process that you embarked on anytime you had an endeavor, and that you involved a cross-section of stakeholders. And, the partnerships that you've developed to work successfully towards these goals. And again, these aren't goals you can achieve on your own. And so I'm very confident that you will go forward and maintain, not only, I think you highlight as well, and I think it's really important to point out that you talk about the strategic plan, near-term and ongoing priorities as part of the work that you do, and I know that will be a dual focus for you, and you will simultaneously work on that, and I think that's really important. And, overarching, one thing that I think, respect is the guiding principle that you use in all your decision-making in terms of the strategic plan. And so, we witnessed how you successfully achieved so many things in 16 and 17, and most of all, the three goals that you had. And so I'm very confident that you will go forward and do a really good job with achieving these goals. And I'm really excited about these goals, and I'm really excited for the start of the new year. So
We are too, and I've determined that when people tell me that they are sick of me talking about the strategic plan, we're about halfway there.
Excellent. Well, thank you very much. So any other final comments? I appreciate Amy and Rob also commenting on the goals. Is there anyone else? Other final comments? Otherwise, we have a motion and a second to approve the superintendent goals for school year of 17-18 as presented. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Okay, we will move on then with the second item for individual action, which is the proposed 17-19 agreement with the Northfield Education Association. Is there a motion to approve the 2017 through 2019 master agreement with the Northfield Education Association as negotiated? Moved by Noel. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Rob. Questions or comments? Rob?
I just have a question, which maybe Matt can answer. Article 3, rights and obligations of the school board, which I guess we should pay attention to. Section 3, the school board has the obligation to meet and confer with teachers to discuss policies and those matters relating to their employment not included under the PELRA. So could you explain what this section means?
So basically, the concept of meet and confer is that we will schedule, it's typically in years where we negotiate, meet and confer is far less, but in years where we do not have a formal negotiation process, we generally will schedule meet and confer meetings to discuss those kinds of things. The most connected that you get to a meet and confer a lot of times will be the annual calendar discussion, because it's a meet and confer component, a meet and confer group that gets together to talk about the calendar. Now, meet and confer can look a lot different in a lot of different districts. There are districts that will schedule quarterly meet and confers, and if there's not an issue, then they'll cancel the meeting. We have tended to schedule meet and confer when we have some issues that are burning, where we think that we need some more direct dialogue on. A lot of times, as we work with the association, one of our strong efforts is to make sure that we are heading off issues before they become a problem. So, Molly Wieselman, the Director of Human Resources, and I meet with our association leadership twice per month, and not a meet and confer piece, but really we deal with a lot of things that are pre-meet and confer. Some of you might remember last year that some issues that came up during our meetings with the association were around the substitute shortage. And you may remember we had a meet and confer meeting to talk about some of the things with the substitute shortage last year. So meet and confer is designed when we have an issue that we can't iron out informally, but we need to want to bring board members into it and have a broader discussion across the board about ways we could potentially address an issue that may be related to the contract. We do it in that more formal way, and in the contract there's some very specific pieces that you'll see later about how many people can be from both the association and the school district on the meet and confer committee. And so, and in this district, actually, depending on the issue, the association will assign different people to participate in the meet and confer committee. So you may see a different group of teachers at the table when you're discussing the calendar versus maybe when we're discussing the substitute shortage. So Meet and confer is really designed to deal with issues that are related to the contract, but maybe something that was unforeseen. In this district, we tend to iron a lot of those issues out on the fly because of that regular conversation and the really good relationship overall that we've had over the years with the association. Does that help?
I'm just wondering about, to discuss policies of those matters not relating to their relating to their employment not included. So employment policies specifically?
It could be in terms of, like, for example, I'm going to use the substitute shortage that we experienced last year. So there were some questions about the way that we as administrators address issues when we don't have enough substitute teachers. That was a piece where there were some concerns that had come forward because of the shortage in terms of how often we were asking some folks to substitute during their prep time, for example. Some folks who might have been asked to substitute during their prep time but maybe didn't feel comfortable saying, well, I really can't do it because I need to grade these, because they want to be helpful, in terms of. So that's an example of where the district's practices and procedures were not meeting the needs of the associations or the association members in some cases, to the point where the association brought it forward. We had a meet and confer committee that generated several ideas, of which we implemented. We implemented two full-time substitute teachers to help alleviate that. We implemented the secondary level, a system where teachers were requested to sign up. Do they want to substitute during their prep period or not? And if they didn't sign up to substitute during their prep period, we didn't ask them. So that was a matter of, while probably technically not policy per se, it was a method of where the district's approach, and not just our approach, everybody had this issue last year, the way that the district's approach to solving that issue that impacted teaching staff on a daily basis was addressed and attempted to be solved. Now, in some cases, we couldn't fix all of the issues that were brought forward, but I think that there was a holistic attempt to intervene in those cases that was amenable and resulted in action that you took. So that meet and confer piece to discuss an issue. Now, Pell, remember, has a separate set of things that you can that the administration or the management has rights to. So there's some things that you can't, that the administration holds what's called the inherent managerial right. It's a terrible term. I don't like it, but it is what it is. But the association can bring forward those other components that, again, they would like to just have an opportunity to discuss about workplace issues. Does that help?
I'm just wondering about things like, I don't know, let's say we pass a wellness policy.
Sure.
That says teachers should not bring cupcakes into classroom or something.
Which we actually did pass that policy, yes.
So there's a burden on the teachers to enforce this policy. So is that something that they have to have a say in, or can we just pass this and say, teachers, you have to enforce this?
Well, remember, the board sets policy. And in fact, in the contract, and I don't have the page in front of me right now, there are some specific policies that were required to work with the association on. There's 3 or 4 of them that say, before the board makes any change to this, they must meet and confer. Now, meet and confer doesn't mean that we come to an agreement. It means we meet and confer, and then the board still has the opportunity to make that decision. I'll give you an example. So if you think about the calendar, there have been times where the Meet and Confer Committee has made a recommendation to the board about the calendar, and the board, because of their review, have determined something different. So Meet and Confer doesn't mean that it's a negotiated settlement on an issue. It simply means there's a forum for people to express their concerns. So the key thing is you also set policy on things like discipline or food service or the way that we select principals. Those, as the duly elected representatives of the community, you are responsible for setting that policy. If there's an issue in how that policy may be implemented, Meet and Confer would certainly be a place to discuss that, and then that would be you hearing directly from representatives of the Teachers Association to maybe reconsider the way that a particular policy has been implemented.
So if in the wild world where they have problems with not having cupcakes or whatever, they would have the opportunity to call a session of this Meet and Confer or whatever. I mean, if it's something that's
sure, and what I would really
their employment, which is enforcing some of these things.
Yeah, and I think using the example of the wellness policy, what I would always hope in the way that we try to structure the way that we solve problems is that we try to go through, I need to come up with a better term than this, but it is the term that's used, which is the chain of command. So in a case of a specific policy that there's some challenge in enforcing, typically what I would expect would be that that particular staff member or group of staff members would confer with their principal and discuss, hey, we're struggling with how we implement this, and then they try to problem solve that and they figure that out. If they're not able to do that, they would bring that through their association, typically to Molly and I through our semi-monthly meetings with the association leadership. We would try to work something out. And then if we're still not able to get there, that's where I think the meet and confer, component would come in. So really trying to solve those things. And, I think the other piece, remember, sometimes the policies are things that you as a board specifically determine. And then there's sometimes, like the wellness policy, where we are required to adopt that policy with very specific components in order to meet state and or federal law. And the example that you use is very clearly something that we were required to do in order to meet state and federal law.
Yeah, I think it's just useful for me as a board member to think about at what point do things come to the board, and as you say, things might go through the principal and then through you and then come to the board. So, if it rises to the, if someone emails us and says, I have a problem with this thing, when do you say, this is something that you go to the principal or this you go to the superintendent? And
well, my personal belief in leading school districts is that most often issues can be best addressed between the people closest to the circumstance. So as a governance board, your job is to set the policy,
right,
and then our job is to implement it. And if we see, or if you get 75 emails on something, you're going to say to me, hey, let's take a look at this policy, and we need to take a look at it. And there's a difference between an implementation problem and a policy problem, in terms of, and again, that's why I really believe in all my experience. And if you think about it in your workplaces, the best way to solve problems are between the people who are closest to them. And I think, frankly, that's why we actually don't have a lot of those kinds of really burning issues that come to meet and confer, because we really try to identify those issues before they become a real problem and try to work them out in those areas. And sometimes, in some cases, for example, we may have the director of buildings and grounds, may be part of that decision-making tree in terms of if it's something about indoor air quality. The child nutrition director might be involved in something if it's a policy about what we've been reading about other districts, something we've done for a long time of having a very humane approach to low and negative lunch balances. That's in the news a lot lately. We were doing what people are moving to far before any of those folks were. But in that case, the child nutrition person might be involved in that. So it depends upon the circumstance and the kind of thing that is being brought forward.
Okay, thanks. That was kind of a general philosophical question.
But it's a general collective bargaining
problem.
piece. Yeah.
But yeah, it's interesting to know the.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you. Any other questions or comments? Amy?
So I had an interesting read going through this because it's my first time going through this process. And so my question is, looking at the text of the main contract and not so much at the schedules with all the numbers, how much of the text has been changed from previous years?
I think it's fair to say this year, very minimal. I would say we had less than, I'd have to go back to my notes, but we had less than a dozen language items. Maybe a dozen language items, 12 to 15, I think, total. So, very few changes in language compared to previous years. And part of that is that over the years, Amy, we've really worked to fine tune the contract. And I think the members of the board who have been on the negotiations team over the years, I'm really proud of the negotiations work that we've done with the association. The process is amicable, yet straightforward and tough, in terms of we ask tough questions of each other, but it's done in a very positive way. We always are looking at the balance between making sure that we have a contract that can help us recruit and retain the best employees, while also making sure that we can have sustainability in that and that we can apply those things in a uniform and fair way. So I think over the years, I've noticed each year where we actually have a few less language items because we've had such great conversation over the years. And I think the other thing that's really helped us is that on both the board and the administrative side, we've had some consistency in the members of those negotiations teams. So we tend not to go back to relitigate things that might have been looked at say, 2 contract cycles ago, if that makes sense.
Well, and that's sort of the answer I was hoping for, but I was curious about what the changes were and whether they were reviewed by my fellow board members who were more involved in the process, and, because
Sure.
even minor ones could have a ripple effect down the way, and I'm not fully comfortable not knowing what we're changing.
So I think that I can describe it, and then maybe one of the members of the negotiations team, because I'll just describe for Amy how we do this. So when we negotiate with the teaching staff, there are 3 board members who sit in at every meeting during the process. And so what happens is, typically, the association will create their first proposal and provide it to the district. Once the district receives that proposal, the members of your bargaining team, the staff on your bargaining team are myself, Val Mertesdorf, and Molly Wieselman. And then with our board members, we will review each of the requests, and we will gather board members' feedback about their thoughts about each of the language kinds of items. And then we go back and we draft a response, and board members have a chance to see that before we go into the negotiation session and answer any questions that they have or that they may have. Sometimes we'll, not very often anymore, but sometimes we'll even modify it before we head into the session. And so prior to it even coming to this point, your representatives from the board have been involved in every step of the long way. They've read every question that's come forward. They've read every response, both from the district and from the association. And it's really that your negotiations team who's working on your behalf who looks at each of those requests. We weigh a number of different things in determining what the appropriate response would be, and then we go forward with one voice in terms of what that team has determined as the appropriate way to go.
Is it fair to say that none of the changes made had any major impact?
Well, in terms of, I like to think there's some things that have a good major impact. I'll give you one example, and I don't have the number in front of me, but I'm going to share it conceptually. So when we reviewed the leave that was allowed for adoption, we were embarrassed because no one had asked for it for such a long time. I believe, if I remember that, did we have 10 days or 5 days?
I think it was 10.
So for someone who was adopting a child, you had 10 days of leave. Well, we know that takes a lot longer than that, and we had a situation come up in the last year where we're like, oh my goodness, this is not something that we think is. So in that particular case, the change that's in the contract is an increase in the ability for a person to use their sick leave, to be able to go for the adoption of a child. That's one example, which I think is a major positive, in terms of that. And is that something we can sustain? Of course it is something that we can sustain, because as we look at that in the broader scope of leave, we determine that we think it's better off for the district to be able to do that more so than another particular area. There was also another area of parental leave where we increased the number of days that if you have the baby, there's a certain number of days that you get, but if you're a parent who didn't have the baby, you have another amount of days. And so we did some increase in that as well. Are those major changes? I think on the adoption side, it certainly was a major change. I think that the increased parental leave, probably maybe not as major, but still substantial. So I would say that's just an example of one of the couple of the changes in the agreement. And I would say that those, if you were to say major, those are probably the most major kind. Otherwise, sometimes we'll add a word. We'll change one minor piece in terms of to reflect something that was updated or new, but most of the time it's an implementation kind of thing.
You picked the perfect example for me because I'm an adoptive mother, and I actually fully support maternity leave benefits for adoptive parents. So I'm glad that it's moving in that direction.
And frankly, a lot of times, we make those kinds of recommendations, in terms of, because the contract, I think sometimes people look at as, it's these two sides tugging of war. And while both sides, which I never used to like to say, but while both sides have a role to play, at the end of the day, what we are looking for with a contract is something that attracts people to choose Northfield and encourages them to stay. Because without a world-class staff, we're not a whole lot of anything, right? So it's these people who are really on the front lines with our students, and we want to make sure that we have that contract that's in the appropriate balance of being sustainable. The way I describe it is I want a contract that can recruit and retain the best staff possible while balancing that against being able to sustain it for as long as possible.
Thank you.
Excellent. Any other questions or comments? Rob?
I just wanted to say, I mean, I kind of came in at the last minute sitting in on one of the negotiation sessions, and I was really impressed that both sides, had this one common point of reference, which is what is best for the district and what is best for the people who work here, because you always say it's a people business that we're in, and it's what's best for the teachers, what's best for the students, and the teachers are not going to have the high-quality workplace that they have if the students are shortchanged. The students are not going to have the high-quality experience if the teachers are shortchanged, and the administrators are not going to have a great organization to administer if anybody's shortchanged. And I think everybody was looking at that common goal, and it was really kind of, I mean, it's weird to say that a negotiation session was kind of inspiring, but it really was to see people working together in that way, even when they're, nominally on opposite sides.
Excellent. Thank you for those comments, Rob. And I think,
The only thing I would add to that is the parents, you're all employees of the state of Minnesota. That's a great state of Minnesota. The alumni, which we don't really have a huge voice here, but there's a few of us out there. But so I think it's by reputation what you want to be in. I mean, I have a big heart for Northfield, and I think that we want to stand for excellence, and we're an education town. But we want to, from little people to big people, we want good people. So I think that the fact of the matter is, it's a good school district, and we had some good leadership here. Let's just keep doing the same thing and work on it year by year. So thank you.
excellent. Thank you. Yes, Rob, thank you for sort of summarizing your perspective of the negotiations. And I think Noel and Ellen and I, who were fortunate enough to be at the majority of the meetings, would absolutely agree with Rob. And I think we'd be remiss in not thanking Dr. Hillman and Val Mertsdorf and Molly Bieselman for your work. And it really is, you come at it from a wonderful perspective of what is in the best interest of students, and you work hard to strike that balance between how do we recruit and retain the best high-quality teachers while remaining fiscally responsible. So I know that, often you hear districts where it gets contentious, and we're fortunate in Northfield that it has never risen to that level in any of our recent memory. And I think it's absolutely in part due to the relationships that you've built with the staff and with administrators with the community. So.
And to be clear, it's amicable, but that doesn't mean that it's not vigorous. I think that that's important. And I think it's a great point that it's a good deal for me because I do the talking, but Molly and Val do the actual work, which is really a good thing. So thanks to Molly and Val for all the behind-the-scenes effort that they do to get us to that point.
Okay,
I've been negotiating, I'm on the negotiating side of the table for years, and it's a real eye-opener. You think you know the district, and there are some things that come up that you don't know, and it's an opportunity to learn a whole lot more about the district. It's just really a good experience. I really value it.
Excellent, thank you. All right, is there any other comments? Okay. We have a motion and a second to approve the master agreement with the Northfield Education Association as negotiated. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. That brings us to the consent grouping. As a reminder, there were a couple of personnel items in the table file to be added to the consent grouping. Is there anything anyone would like to pull from the consent grouping? Rob?
Well, I just have a question, so
Sure.
I don't know if it's worth pulling.
Yeah, just ask the
Okay.
question. Yeah, we won't need to pull it.
Yeah, I'm just wondering about
Yeah.
the 1.0 FTE plus 88 student days or 86 student days. I mean, what that is.
Yep. So what happens when we calculate an overload, the way that the contract reads is that we pay a proportion, an additional proportion of the teacher's day for the number of days that they're going to teach the overload. So in some cases, an overload might be for an entire year. In other cases, it might be for a semester. So it could be because it's just a semester course. It could be that in some cases, people might share the overload for the year, and one might do the first semester, one might do the second semester. But when you see the number of days, Rob, it's about the number of days that they have an extra assignment above and beyond what the contract allows them to have as a full-time position.
Okay, so this is two science teachers who are splitting an overload?
Very well could be, yep. And that sounds like what it would be in that particular case.
Okay.
One might do the first semester, one might do the second semester.
Okay. So if there isn't anything anyone would like to pull from the consent grouping, and Rob, you were good with that answer?
Yep.
Okay. All those in favor?
I'll move it.
Oh, I'm
Second.
sorry. Is there a motion to approve the consent grouping? I'm sorry, Noel?
I'll move it.
Moved by Noel, is there a second? Second by Jeff. Okay, thank you. Jeff, sorry. Okay, so all those in favor of approving the consent grouping, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Okay, we'll move on to items for information. Erin Bailey is at the podium. She's going to do, as Director of Community Service, was instrumental in the launch of the new district website, and is going to do, just show some aspects of the website, if some have not seen some of the different elements as it's come together.
The doc's hidden at the bottom. So keep going down, there you go now.
Well, I'm happy to be here tonight to share a little bit more about the refresh of the district website, and certainly hope that all of you have had a chance to check this out. I'm going to make it up.
I'll come over and help you. And
Thank you.
talk
Can you
about
tell
it.
I'm
I can
struggling?
fix. Yep.
This isn't on my own computer or a mobile device, so this is,
But actually, this is a good example.
this is a good example of, yes, it is in advance what it would look like on your mobile device. So as Matt's getting us set up, I want to start by thanking Nuger Communications and the 34 district staff that participated in this large project of kind of refreshing the district website. We started this project in late spring. And had a core team that originally met with Nuger Communications to review some of the analytics of our previous site, and kind of know where traffic is going and where they're looking at things. We had a team of frontline staff that helped give feedback about what they hear from parents, staff in the building, students, and then we had a large group of staff who helped with editing and then populating the content on this refresh site, which takes an enormous amount of time too. There were a handful of goals with this project as we got started. Probably one of the first goals that we had was to reduce the number of pages. So the old district website was 417 pages, of which I'm sure no one in this room has ever read all of those pages, and we reduced it actually down to 125 pages. And so just making sure that as we were going through the content, that we were able to really look at what was out there. And part of it was pages had been added over the last 6 or 7 years, and so making sure that those got kind of cleaned up. Other goals was to make the information on the website more static. And this is not to say that we're not going to continue to have current information. We're just wanting to make sure we continue to use Schoology to get that information delivered to parents. We're finding more and more often parents are using Schoology for those emails to get the quick updates about what things are happening, not necessarily going to the district website for news that is up. Thank you. And knowing how long that took you, I'm glad I didn't attempt to do that. And so knowing that parents are each year more and more using Schoology and not kind of checking out that information on the district website and trusting that communication that's coming from their building principal. And so really having what's on this district website more static. Another was to ensure that the website was mobile enabled. So you briefly saw that, but if you do pull this up on your phone or your iPad, instead of previously where it would scrunch and you'd have to stretch it out with your fingers, it now adjusts to the device that you're on, and so it's much more user-friendly. And then one of our last goals was to become fully compliant with current web standards. Some of the features that this refresh site includes is if you are visually impaired and need a screen reader, all PDFs now are able to be viewed with that screen reader. That was not capable on our old site. You'll notice there's captions on pictures. I'll just give an example here. So pictures on here have captions to them. So again, if there is any sort of disability where you need some assistance with the website, there are many more features built in to the refresh site to assist with that. Some of the other highlights is I ran a focus group to kind of best determine how to make this site accessible for the Spanish-speaking population in Northfield. And we ended up with kind of a two-pronged approach. The first being that this entire site translates into Spanish. So by clicking on the Spanish button right up here, you can then select a drop-down language. This currently only has Spanish. And the entire site translates into Spanish. Slide down.
Scroll with your finger on the.
So as you can see, then the entire website will translate into Spanish. The feedback we got from the focus group is, there are still some kinks with Google Translate, but as far as being able to get information out to the public, it is still a very accessible way for those that are Spanish speaking. And this is by far the most content we've ever had translated in Spanish on the website, which is really exciting too. So that would be the first, is obviously that the site translates into Spanish. Then we also have, get it out of here for a second. This page that gives staff in their areas so if you would like to speak to a staff person that speaks Spanish, when you clicked on the drop down in Spanish, it does say to speak to a Spanish speaking staff person. This is the page then that directs you to a person in the district. So it has both their email addresses and their phone numbers, and we need to do a little more addition because we have a few more bucket areas in early childhood, the community school, and things like that. So they will be added here, but this then allows, so in addition, if you would like to speak to someone, this also gives you that option as well. And then what you've likely seen is this banner across the top, and which you can see right now it's green and it talks about enrollment options. Partly we have enrollment there because we have a referendum button, as you can see, and that is where we're using it this fall. In other falls, we would look at locating the enrollment information there. So for now, we're using the green banner for enrollment information. This banner can be changed by each school building. So if the high school wants to remind students to pick up their cap and gown by Friday, they can put that on their banner and it would be just visible on the high school page. So a great feature to have, again, customizable by each building. We also then have a banner that would be yellow for weather-related clothing. That one would be consistent among all the buildings, so that would stand out too and can be added and taken down as needed. One of the things we're working with Nuger Communications is in case we would have a major emergency where we would potentially see high volumes of traffic to the district website, we are going to have a bare bones site that would be our crisis page and would be able to handle that amount of traffic, in which case this site would kind of come down. We would put up this bare bones site that allows a large amount of traffic and allows us to be able to very quickly add updates there. So, Matt, am I missing any of the highlights that we should be adding?
Well, I think one of the pieces that I think is really important is that there's been some regrouping of pages by interest group. So, when you click on the parents, I think if you could click on the parents one, I think that's a really good one to look at, because what you see as you scroll down is you're going to see they've done some analysis. They actually went through the Google Analytics from the previous site, and they determined, okay, these are the things that we see a lot of people from outside the district coming to. So, making payments, registering for activities, enrolling, reporting absences, those kinds of things that you see are the things that we know are the things that people are mostly coming to the website for. So I think that that's a really, important piece that we're trying to group that by user type.
Yep, that's a good point. And that was what the original core team, before we started any of the work, reviewing those analytics to decide kind of what are the more key buttons for each user group. And I think lastly, as we get about a month into the school year, we are going to, that frontline staff that provided some feedback before we started this project, that team and Newgate Communications will sit down and meet again to gather the feedback that we've heard from parents or staff, both positive or things that might not be working quite the way we want them to, so that we, people have had about a month back into the school year. All staff were notified on August 4th when this site did go live, but have maybe spent a little more time in the site. Parents have been back looking for things on the site. So that group will reconvene to just make any necessary tweaks that have come up in the last 6 or 8 weeks.
Excellent, thank you. Board members have questions or comments?
I just wanted to say, because I've emailed you about this,
Yeah.
that the calendars are a lot better than they used to be, and
Thanks.
and I know you did some fixes of them since I talked to you, but it's really nice to be able to get a more comprehensive, I mean, it was very easy to find sports events, but it wasn't easy to find a lot of other things, and they're all together on, and you can get the school-specific calendars, which is really nice.
So calendars, as we did the analytics, was one of those buttons that was heavily used. And so what Rob is talking about is we've now, there's a calendar at the top on the tab for a tab, and then you can come to each of your buildings and select a calendar, and auto-populates what's at that building.
Yeah, that's good.
Other questions or comments? Well, Erin, thank you and your team for the work. I've been on it quite a bit, and I just really think the redesign is so good, or the refresh is so good. And what I most appreciate right now over the next few weeks, of course, is the referendum tab and the wealth of information that's there, and how large the fonts are, and how easy it is to click on information and email a question, and it's an amazing source of information, really easy accessible. So thanks to you and your team for the great work.
Thank you.
Okay, good. So speaking of referendum, we have a quick referendum update by Dr. Hillman.
Yes. So the couple of items that I had to just share with you tonight is that we have scheduled and are getting ready to start promoting our community-wide presentations. While there's a number of different presentations that are happening, for example, I'm giving one tomorrow night at 5 o'clock at the middle school as part of their open house process, or on Wednesday, excuse me, not tomorrow, on Wednesday I'm doing that. But we have 2 community-wide presentations set up, one for September 18th and one for October 16th. Both of those would start at 7 p.m. and take place in the high school media center, or high school auditorium, excuse me. And, the key thing there is we'll provide about the 20-minute presentation, have an opportunity for questions and those kinds of things for, while there's a lot of other, I think we're going to end up giving about several dozen of these. These are 2 that we're promoting as across the district kinds of things. So, and then as Julie mentioned, the website, the referendum website is up and very functional, and we have a video, a recording of the presentation posted. And then we also have the first version of the frequently asked questions. Actually, we now have the second version of the frequently asked questions up with one minor change. And then, of course, there's the poll finder, so people can find where they are supposed to vote, the combined polling places. There's also the interactive tax impact calculator, so someone would like to know what the proposals will cost them. They can go right there. It shows them how to look at their evaluation, and they can plug that in and get both their annual and monthly cost. So there's quite a bit of information there that we're sample ballot, a number of different things, and we're really at the point probably with the kind of information that we're going to have there. Some of it might be tweaked. We've already tweaked a number of those things as we've started, and as we continue through the fall, there will be things, the piece that will update the most often will be the frequently asked questions. So that's going. And then just want to report that the district's operating levy and bond referendum guide is very near completion. We have an entire team of people who've been reviewing it and preparing final edits, and our goal is to get that to the printer next week. And our goal is to have that arrive in people's mailboxes the week that would include September 22nd. So I think that's the week of the 19th or 18th. I think it's that week that we're looking at it, late September, for it to arrive in people's mailboxes. So With that being said, that's your brief referendum update. It reminds me of some of the old 5-minute updates we gave, but this was less, so.
Excellent. Any questions for Dr. Hillman on the referendum update? Okay. So last item for discussion, we talked last week, the personnel supporting documentation, and the goal was to come back to this meeting and for Dr. Hillman to have an opportunity to review the process and how it might be modified.
Yeah, so at the last meeting, Board Member Margaret Colangelo asked about the amount of paper in terms of all of the recommendations for hire that we gave to each of you at every meeting. And the question was, why do we have it? And is there a possibility of us maybe streamlining the board packet for you a bit? And so, of course, the key thing is in the, most often in the consent grouping, you have all the specific information that you need to know about who's the person that we're suggesting to hire, what position are we hiring them for, if it's full-time or not full-time, what's the step placement or the rate of pay, when might the starting date be, and if there's an ending date, which is very important, is there an ending date? And so when you think about how it comes to the board, it comes to the board in those sentences. And when we went back to look at the backup or the other items that have been in the board packet, I hate to say this, but the best we could figure is that we're doing it that way because that's the way we've done it since the dawn of time. And I think that I really appreciate the opportunity to discuss and look at the way that we bring these things forward. You have the packet tonight as you have in the past, but after conferring with the Human Resources Department, conferring with Danita, who does a lot of the final putting together of the board packet, conferring with a board chair, Julie Pritchard, beginning with the September 11th meeting, we are going to remove the recommendation for hire notices. One thing that I want to really make clear to folks watching at home is that this does not change at all the public packet that's posted on the website. The recommendation for hire forms that I'm mentioning are with specific personal information on new personnel information that we would not release in terms of things like home address and some other things that are not public information. So the packet that the public sees will not change at all. It is simply the board packet with some additional information. Frankly, I think the board packet and the public packet will pretty much now be the exact same. And so we did a lot of talking about, okay, what were the things that board members might value in some of those things? If there's a specific individual that you would like to have some more information on, so you get your packet in digital form on a Thursday, and you see there's a particular position hired and you have some questions about that, you can certainly contact Director of Human Resources, Molly Wieselman, and she can work through that with you. One of the things that I know people have also appreciated is knowing when you think about recruiting and retaining staff. I know some people have said that they really value seeing how many applications there were for a position, how many people were interviewed, those kind. I want to be really clear. The administrators are still going to complete the recommendation for hire form, and our central office administrative staff will still be reviewing that to make sure that there's that check and balance of when we have so many applicants, how many people are being interviewed to make sure that there's that integrity of process. We are working to see, I don't have a final way that we can do this yet, but what we're looking at is we're trying to see, can we almost produce something that looks like or feels like the enrollment options report, but about our positions. And we don't know yet how we would be able, so the concept would be that we would give you a report that said we had so many elementary teaching positions, these were the total number of applicants for those positions. We don't have all of that ironed out yet, but trying to find basically some way to give you a report on the status of our ability to recruit people for these positions. I don't exactly know how it probably is not going to look as detailed as the enrollment options report because we have far more variables than what the enrollment options report has. But district administration is reviewing, is there a way that on an annual basis we can talk to you about the district's hiring and what are the areas where we have a lot of applicants for, what are the areas that we're continuing to struggle to have those applicants for, because I know that that's an important thing that you want to know, because for example, when we talked about the contract before, that's an important part of, are we getting the people to apply that we need to have the best staff. So basically on September 11th, for that September 11th board meeting, we're going to go to not having the recommendation for hire pieces in there. And then if there's a specific one that you're interested in, you can certainly contact Molly and she can give you the additional information.
Questions? Amy?
So looking at this sheet that we will still be getting, I was wondering if it might work to have it more as a spreadsheet information. Just a thought.
I think the HR department, I think, has a very good strategy of how they get that in there. And I'm going to trust that they have a very good process that's very efficient in getting it to that part. And I think that they're very comfortable with how they put that particular part together, just to be transparent, that they have a process that they go through. And I think anytime we start to mix different kinds of files, even though we're pretty good at that, it becomes problematic. And what we're trying to do is make sure that we can be as efficient as possible in getting that to you. But in terms of, we use a number of spreadsheets behind the scenes in terms of sorting those kinds of things. But in this document, I think the best way to do it still is the Word document, because then we have one kind of document to work with.
I was thinking of some way to make it a little more readable, and maybe it's just putting the names in bold or something, because then it would help break it up a little bit.
Okay. Well, I appreciate that feedback, and we can certainly bring back that style change to folks in terms of just to get their feedback on that.
Ellen?
I really appreciate your work on this, and particularly after we've gone to 2 pages now, I'm appreciative of Margaret for bringing this up at the board, and then Dr. Hillman for you discussing it with Molly. I'm really interested in what you were talking about with the annual report, because I was going to say, that's one thing as a board member I do watch is how many applicants, and you start to synthesize in your head, okay, this how many that we're getting, many more, let's say at elementary education, and that the special ed is, where is the teacher shortage? How are we experiencing it at Northfield? And I actually like the idea of going to what you're talking about, because instead of individual board members relying so much on their experience and synthesizing what's in our head from, meeting to meeting, we'll have it in a more systematic way. So I really appreciate the work on this.
And we're not sure, because if we were to show you every single posting through the year, so that we don't believe that the system can generate that level of report, we may actually do more of a qualitative sampling. So we may say, for example, we had this particular elementary position at Sibley this year. This is representative of the rest of them. Here's another example is this. And so we may give you that kind of, I suppose that might be an ethnography, right?
Yeah.
Okay, very good, yes.
Excellent. Yes, I agree. Yes. Thanks for your comment, Ellen. I'm sorry. Any other board members' questions or comments? I do also appreciate your work, and I know that this is an onerous effort for the human resources personnel. So I'm really happy that their load has been lightened, particularly in light of we know that we have a number of additional employees who have chosen to go with benefits with our district, and so I would much rather have them spending their time servicing our employees with their benefits needs rather than making copies for board members. So I'm very supportive of this, and I'm glad that Margaret brought it forward and we were able to see that through. Okay. Excellent. So that is our last item for discussion. We move on now to future meetings. Monday, September 11th and Monday, September 25th, both at 7 p.m. in the Northfield High School Media Center. And with that, we have to say happy back to school to all our families and staff and students. And here we are on the embarking on another school year. So exciting stuff. With that, I ask for a motion to adjourn. Moved by Noel. Is there a second? Second by Jeff. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. We are adjourned.